it, which in confidence that they actually will. But anyways, what did they tell me at Apple? They sent it to the tech center, which is somewhere near the airport, to be fixed. Now, the problem is that it went to the wrong place. It went to the warehouse instead of the tech center. So the irony of it all is that the tech center, which is literally next door to the warehouse, which received it, the tech center cannot send it to the warehouse next door. They have to send it back to Santon and only then send it back. So they updated me about that just to tell me how ridiculous it is. But that's the way it is. I won't complain because that computer was donated to me by the people at Apple, the Chikavitzes, and why that policy exists, who knows? I don't even know if they're aware of it. I guess they could track it better instead of it moving next door. But the thing is, you have to ship it back. So it has to go back from the airport back to Santon, and then back to the airport, even though it's already at the airport, but it's just in the next door room. That's what they told me on the phone. So it's very interesting how those things work, but what could you do? That's just life, that's Africa. So the questions we asked that we're going to discuss is, why is the Torah formulated as both written text and an oral dialogue? Meaning Torah Shabbat, which is the written laws of the Torah, the 24 books of the Torah that we're talking about, 5 books of Moses, and then how many books of the prophets? How many? 17. Pardon? Now, altogether it's 24. The prophets and the scriptures will add up to 24 in total, but there are specifically, how many books? No, 24 books. So 5 books of the Torah, right? Here, let me put it on the screen for you. What am I doing? Here you have 24 books of Torah. You have the Torah, Nevi'im, and the Ksuvim, right? Prophets and the writings. Now let's do it right here on the screen so everybody sees exactly what the books are. 5 books of Torah, right? Now the prophets. You have Yoshua, Shoftim, Shmuel, Malachim, Yeshayahu, Yirmiyahu, Yecheskel, and Trei Asar, the 12, pardon? Well, really, this adds up to a lot more because the 12, if you're going to add them up, but the 12 are one book. Yeah. We don't classify it as 12. The book itself is called the 12. Okay, and also some of these books are doubles as well. For example, there's Shmuel Aleph and Shmuel Beis. In total, that is 8 plus 12, 20. Okay, but now add 2 books of Kings, Malachim Aleph, Malachim Beis, 2 books of Shmuel Aleph, Shmuel Beis. Can I tell you the joke when I was in Israel once? So we were in Tzfat, in the north of Israel. And there we had a tour guide, and the tour guide was telling us this is the cave which is where Shmuel the prophet is buried. So I asked the tour guide, I said, there's something that I don't understand, because last time I took a tour with you, you showed me a different cave. You said that was for the prophet Shmuel. He says, no, that was Shmuel Aleph, this is Shmuel Beis. There was only one person named Shmuel. I mean, there were many people Shmuel. I mean, in my own class in school. You know, the irony that you joked about names that are popular. So there was a time at Torah Academy here where every kid would be named Menachem Mendel. Yesterday, I went to a teacher's event, the inauguration of the school last week. So I came to the school event, so gesund, and I see only one Menachem Mendel. I asked them, they want us to sit in the seats of our kids to experience what our kids are experiencing in school. So I asked them, is there only one Menachem Mendel? And they said there is. I was shocked because I expected that for sure there's going to be multiple Menachem Mendels and Chaim Mushkas too, right? But no, interestingly, I have no Chaim Mushka because I was naming kids after my first daughter after my mother, and then my grandmother, and then my wife's grandmother, so we never got to a Chaim Mushka. And the boys as well. We did name him Menachem Mendel for the Rebbe, and also I had a great grandfather, David Menachem Mendel, but we have 2 separate kids, David and Menachem Mendel. Interestingly, so he's the only Menachem Mendel. That's interesting. Although I'm reminded of a story. Isn't there a Dr. Seuss book in which this mother had like 25 kids and she named them all Dave? You know that story? Right? So when we say Torah, all these books here are Torah. The question is which book of Torah we're talking about. Now, very interesting, the little debate, which I didn't, that we had last week about what is included, what qualifies, because you might have things in your mind that you qualify as the Torah, right? And maybe for you, that goes in the category of Torah. But last night I was having this discussion on WhatsApp. At least according to the Otzer HaChachma. Now, if you were making your own Otzer HaChachma, you might decide to categorize whatever book in your mind belongs as part of Torah. But the people of Otzer HaChachma, which is a whole team of scholars in Israel, they only included certain books, so they have obviously their criteria of qualification of what goes into that category. So just to put it out there, I don't think one of us necessarily has the qualification to determine what really should be in Torah, right? So we discussed maybe there are certain books of science that belong in Torah. So maybe if you were canonizing it, now of course canonization, only these 24 books go in Torah, which we'll put the next one on the list right here, the writings as well. But if for you something fits into Torah, I want to say by all means, yes, there are scholars and sages who decide and determine what could be Torah. But if you have the right pair of glasses and you are able to see everything as part of Torah, then that's wonderful. That's good. Okay. Yeah. So you're mentioning something very important. It says in the Gemara, Kol masha Talmud vasig asig chadash, which means anything that a future scholar would eventually innovate, God already told Moses at Mount Sinai.
That's what I mean.
No, so I think, fine. So I will, okay. So Parah and everyone else, let us go back to the rule of we'll break for questions every 10 minutes. As you can see, I'm open to this, but if it's disturbing, and I like interaction, but if everyone's feeling lost, then maybe it's better that we do it every once in a while. No, nothing personal. Okay. All right. So the point I'm making is that obviously we have all these 24 books. These 24 books and nothing else can be considered written Torah. There's nothing else that goes into the category of written Torah. Everything else is in the oral Torah. Now, oral Torah, there's two parts to it I need to be clear about. One is the one we just mentioned. Anything that a future wise scholar was going to innovate is part of Torah, but that's their own innovation. And whether that's included in what Moshe gave to what God told Moses at Mount Sinai or not, maybe it is. Okay, it must be. But there's also legislated laws and derived laws. And that's not something that you and I can innovate. Now, I don't consider myself anywhere of an innovator, but anything that is legislated and derived, that is one category of oral law. That means God told that to Moses. Moses taught that tradition. And over the years, that remained oral. That was something that was not transcribed. It only was transcribed by Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi when he realized, hold on a second, this is getting lost. And there's coming a time where we're debating what was actually taught by Moses. And that's a problem. Because if anybody will say, this is what I learned from Moses, say, no, we're going to have, which one was it? That's why he transcribed it, eventually. So if I ask you what is in Tanakh, is it ethics, is it values, is it morals, is it history, is it philosophy, is it law? The answer really truly is, it is what? All of them, right? All of these categories, which we'll discuss now, fit into it. But this is all part of the teachings of Tanakh. It is literally an encyclopedia of life. And that's why it says, delve into it, and delve into it. This is the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, so we're all familiar with it. Another? Yeah, everything is in it. Everything is in it. Good. And that's a reminder to us. Everything is in it. And everything truly is in it. Right? So while I was at the parents-teachers meeting at school yesterday, and I was really beaming when I heard about how they're teaching the mathematics and the science and sociology and all that, because it's important. In grade 1, they said they bring a science lab into the class and they do science experiments. It's important when you're studying Torah to have all that in mind. That's all important part of Torah. No doubt about that. I don't argue or debate that at all. It's important. The kids have to know that. And I do feel bad for kids who go to schools where they're deprived of that. I do feel bad, because it's all part of Torah, no doubt. So we then went on to the definition of the word Torah. What does Torah mean? We said, well, it's a noun which means instruction, a guide toward life. And we explained that the mitzvahs in the Torah detail the instructions, the do's and the don'ts of life. You want to know how to use this piece of technology or any other? Well, read the instruction manual. Don't be like the person whose house I went to check the mezuzah and the scroll was missing from the box. And I asked her, well, where's the mezuzah? She says, what do you mean? You're holding it. That's this is just a box. It's empty. Where's the scroll that's inside? She says, oh, you mean the instructions? I knew how to put it up, so I threw them out. So what did you ask me to come check? I don't know. Rabbis check mezuzahs. No, that's not what I came to check, right? So that's the scroll inside. Just by the way, rabbis can't just check it. You have to be qualified. Even amongst rabbis, there are certain things rabbis are qualified to do. And I'm the first to say, and there are many areas that I'm unqualified. Okay, many areas that I'm not qualified for. Okay, more of a GP in rabbinics. That's what you get when you learn smicha. Just to learn a little bit about a lot of things, not enough about everything. Every aspect of Torah, we said, falls under this category, call it Torah Chaim, an instruction of life. All those categories, all those areas of life are included in this. And when we study, so we did the video yesterday, so we're not going to do that. This is where we were talking about the 3 modes of communication. And this is what we'll understand. This is still in the written Torah. We're not we are not up to oral Torah yet. Maybe we'll get there just now. So one we talked about already was the God spoke to Moshe. Yes. We said, how did Hashem speak to Moshe? Let's put it on the screen. God spoke to Moshe face to face. This is a mode of communication that no other prophet experienced. And Moses is the only one who experienced this mode of prophecy face to face, just like we see each other here in person in this room right now. So this is one mode of prophecy that is unique to Moses. Now, whereas God did speak to the other prophets, but what does it say? There were other modes, through a vision, through a dream. It wasn't this direct face-to-face communication that Moses experienced. So right away, we're seeing one distinction between Moses' mode of prophecy and the other prophets, how they experienced divine revelation. Now, the 613 mitzvahs, are they in the 24 books of Tanakh that we put on the screen before? No, they're only in the 5 books of the Torah. Only in the 5 books of Moses. Everything else, yes, the rest of the prophets and scriptures have many instructions and morals and values and ethics and history and all that. And many of them emphasize and review and highlight the commandments, but they do not the 613 commandments are not from the rest of Tanakh. They're specifically from those 5 books of the Torah. Let's look at this text on the screen right now. Says the Gemara and Tractate Megillah that 48 prophets and 7 prophetesses prophesied to the people of Israel. Just on another note, elsewhere in the Gemara it says that the people of that time, of that generation, were all on a level of prophecy. So unlike today, where I can't claim to be a prophet, I love the tagline at my kids' school, Torah Academy. They're building a new high school building, and the big sign outside says, we cannot predict the future. We're not prophets, but we can build it. So certainly we have to build it, but these prophets, they experience those other forms of prophecy. None of them experienced the same prophecy as Moses. And therefore, it says, these prophets were unable to subtract nor add to the written Torah. We talked about this adding and subtracting from Torah in past classes, so we're not going to discuss that today. But let's talk about their forms of prophecy. Their form of prophecy is one that is called Ruach HaKodesh. You familiar with that? Literally, Ruach HaKodesh could be divine inspiration or a form of vision, and we're going to talk more about that now. What that mode of prophecy was, unlike Moses' experience of face-to-face revelation from God. So as a rule, we say the prophets neither subtracted nor added to the written Torah, because Moses was the ultimate prophet. And what's interesting is a much later day sage, who could guess, probably lived 2,000 years after Moses, more than 2,000, 2,500 years after Moses, who we say from Moses to Moses, there was none like Moses. Hint, it's an acronym of his name in today's Chumash portion, Rambam. Very good. Rambam, Rabbeinu Moshe ben Maimon, his name was Moshe. He also lived in Egypt. If you recall, we did a series about him. By the way, it was his yahrzeit last week. And the Rebbe had a major campaign to study Maimonides. So I will give you a little preview before it becomes public information. We here at Chabad are in the midst of planning a major celebration for the completion of the study cycle of Rambam this year, which will happen a week after Pesach. And we're planning to do it at the Wanderers Stadium. We're planning for something really big, a Hakel event. As we know, this is the year of Hakel. This year, the year after Shemitah, the year after the sabbatical year in Temple Times, is the year of Hakel. And the coinciding with the conclusion of the 3-chapter cycle and the daily chapter cycle of Rambam study, and to please God, gather the community together. So we're planning for something really big, and I will fill you in on more details as we put it together. So this is part of what's happening this year, please God. And we look forward to this major, major event for men, women, children, grandchildren, grandparents, everybody together to be there. And I encourage everyone to come. It will be, well, if there's anyone visiting South Africa, will also be welcome to come. Surely we'll Zoom it. Well, I don't think we'll advertise on Zoom. I'll tell you why. Because if you see it's on Zoom, why should I come in person? We want this to be an in-person gathering and experience. I don't think we'll do Zoom, actually. I think we will not do Zoom because we want people to come. And just imagine at Wanderer Stadium, great place for people to come together. It will be a great event. So you can mark your calendars already. I don't remember the date offhand, but it's the week after Pesach on a Sunday afternoon. And we'll have some cricketers there. You get your cricket material signed, your bats, your grandchildren or children, or come yourselves and just have, it's going to be a wonderful event. We're going to utilize the big screens. We'll do some big stuff. I plan to have a game show to keep it interactive. We're really planning if you have other ideas, but we also want to keep it to like an hour to an hour and a half program. So everybody comes and enjoys and it's not drawn out. It's going to be something grand. It'll be an afternoon. We'll probably do it sometime in the towards evening, not like 4 p.m. Maybe people will be able to come at like 3 o'clock to see if you devices are not muted. Just mute them because it's very disruptive. I don't mute. Everyone should remain muted. All right. Yeah, go ahead. We haven't taken a break in a while.
Some people in the book say,
Yeah.
from Moses to Moses to Moses. They include
Okay. So certainly in our time, he was a great halachic authority. There's no doubt. And the Rebbe would send all his questions to Rabbi Feinstein. The Rebbe did not consider himself a halachic authority, a posek, even though many people saw the Rebbe as such. He did not see himself as such, and the Rebbe did not rule on halachic matters. He always sent people and considered them the posek the authority of halacha in our generation. Yeah. So now today, when I was doing the Chumash this morning, and I'm forgetting my multitude of wonders in the land of Egypt is an acronym for Rambam, and Rambam was one of those great scholars, and he lived in Egypt. Anyways, we won't digress with today's discussion. Not about, but the point is that Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, was the greatest halachic authority of his time. What am I saying? I just hacked the China. You realize he wasn't just of his time, of all times. And that's why we say that no later prophet was able to reduce, to subtract, or to add to his teaching. There's only 613 commandments that Moses gave us in the Torah from Sinai. Nothing else can be added or subtracted, no matter how great a later prophet was. Now, of course, there was the era of prophets. And after that era was closed, we say that today, prophecy, now there are great sages and scholars, but the era of prophecy does not exist today. What was the job of the prophets? We talked about this yesterday, to exhort an individual or community to repent for wrongdoing, as you can see throughout the works of the prophets, to warn of future calamity and how to avoid it, as well as to provide hope with divine promises of future salvation. This is not somebody saying, I believe there'll be a great future. This was a promise from God that they were reporting to the people. Okay. We haven't yet discussed how their prophecy worked. So let's talk about now how the prophecy worked. And this is the inspiration for the Ksuvim, for the writings. And that is the section called Ksuvim. So we said 5 books of Torah, right? 9 books of the prophets, and 11 books of the writing Ksuvim. Did we get the numbers correct? No. 8 books of the prophets. Yeah, but that's all included in it. So it's 24 in total, because it's a separate book. Okay. All right. With that in mind, so that's 13, 8 books of prophets, right? And 11 books of writings, if I'm getting it correct. If I didn't confuse myself or yourself. The 12. What's that? Yes, these 12 here, that's why it says 13A, 13B, 13C. They're all part of, they're part of the book called Trei Asar, okay, which is 12. All right. So when we get to this part of Tanakh, the 11 books that are called the writings, these books represent an even greater degree of human involvement than prophecy. They're not as prophecy driven as the prophets themselves. So they were written with Ruach HaKodesh, with this divine inspiration, meaning that while God inspired the authors of these books to write these words, there was no explicit communication from God as there is when God communicates with a prophet. So these books, the author of these books, right? They were prophets themselves, many of them, right? Shmuel HaNavi wrote the book of Ruth. So it's interesting, while the book is called Ruth, it is attributed to Shmuel HaNavi. Or who wrote Lamentations? Eicha. Anyone know? Jeremiah. Yirmiyahu, who's part of the prophets, yet Eicha is part of the writings. You understand? Tehillim, which is attributed to King David, although you'll see throughout Tehillim many other authors. So King David, if he was the one who compiled it, he's telling you straightforward, Lahavdil Dale Carnegie. Anyone here taking Dale Carnegie course or written Dale Carnegie's works? I say the course because it's a lot more interactive, okay? So I know Clive has taken the Dale Carnegie course. We had the Dale Carnegie director, the person who directed Dale Carnegie in this country for many years was Desmond Seba. And he used to come to this shir. He used to share with us a lot of the Dale Carnegie insights. And Dale Carnegie tells you straightforward, I don't make this stuff up. Even if you open a book of Tanya, I find that the introduction to Tanya and Dale Carnegie are very much the same. Because the name that the Alter Rebbe gives to the book of Tanya, the name Tanya became popular because it's the first word in the book. But that's not the name the Alter Rebbe called his book. He actually called his book Likuti Amarim, which means a compilation of teachings. And if you actually read his introduction, he tells you that I don't make any of this stuff up. I'm giving you here all the teachings from Talmud, from Mishnah, from Kabbalah, from Chakira, from philosophy, from Musar, from ethics, all from the teachings of the Torah. Yeah. Lahavdil Dale Carnegie says the same thing. I'm just taking a compilation of teachings, and he tells you his teachings are biblical and are psychological and philosophical and etc. So, Tehillim, King David gives you the authors of many of the Psalms that he put together in his book, but they're not all composed by him, as very clearly indicated. Okay, Shlomo HaMelech, he authored quite a few books. Mishlei, Proverbs. Maybe it will be a fun activity next week. We take out a bunch of the Proverbs. What some people might call Chinese Proverbs. Now, I'm sure there's many great Chinese Proverbs, but some of them come right out of Mishlei, unless they will claim, I don't know, that they predated King Solomon, and maybe he heard their Proverbs and decided to include them in his book. I don't know. I can't debate that. I don't know the history that well, but I've seen certain proverbs that say it's a Chinese proverb, and I say, hold on, but that's in the book of Mishlei by King Solomon. So now which one is it? Is it King Solomon or is it Chinese? Or maybe they're both, maybe they're both true. I don't know, it doesn't mean that two people can have thought of the same thing. Either way. You know what I'm talking about. I don't really study. I mean, I have to be frank and honest with you guys. I don't exactly study books of Chinese proverbs. But in America, where we have kosher Chinese restaurants, I opened the fortune cookies. And we open the fortune cookies, they have little proverbs in them. Exactly. I'm more of a multi-sensory learner than the guy who sits down reading books of stuff. I try to read some books too, but a lot more from all around. So from the fortune cookies, but you never know who's sticking in those little notes in the truck in the fortune cookies, right? Go ahead. Don't be scared of me.
Avram's sons, a number of Avram's sons, who didn't get and sent to the east. So it is possible that there is a common root between the ancestors Chinese and our ancestors that came down the same.
Very interesting. Yeah, very interesting. Listen, there's lots of people who want to say different things about the lost tribes and where they landed and what happened with them. We don't know. I guess. Listen, they do DNA testing these days, and it's certainly proven that the Lemba are in Africa. A lot of them are in Zimbabwe. A lot of Lemba people here in South Africa as well, and Limpopo. Oh, in Johannesburg too, but like I'm talking about, like tribes of Lemba live on swaths of land there, who, according to DNA testing, proved to trace their lineage, or at least their DNA, to Kohanim, to priests. Okay. Of Levi, right? But then again, when I was in India 20 years ago for Pesach. So it will be over 20 years ago now. There was a big group in India called B'nai Menashe. So they're coming from Joseph, from Menashe. Now, the B'nai Menashe, when they came to Israel, and there's a large group of B'nai Menashe in Israel today, they were required to convert. Why? The sages in Israel, and by the way, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, when it came to him, I don't think he ruled on B'nai Menashe, because that was in 1948 when B'nai Menashe moved to Israel. So it was who was the great scholar then? Forgetting his name. Oh gosh. Not Chafetz Chaim, he passed away already. No, Rabbi Chaim Kanevsky just passed away less than a year ago. Pardon? No, and B'nai Brak. Come on, I think Rabbi Chaim Kanevsky maybe was related to him. The Ben Ish Chai, or no, not Ben Ish Chai, another one similar. If I don't use their names regularly, I start forgetting. Not the Ben Ish Chai. He did, yes. Anyways, I'm forgetting who it was. Ruled that they should convert. It's called Giur L'Chumra. And the same thing Rabbi Moshe Feinstein ruled about the Ethiopian Jews who moved to Israel. Although it is proven that many of them come from Jewish heritage, but the fact that they did not know very many laws, such as laws of divorce, interestingly. They did not have a Masorah tradition on the laws of divorce. So people would get divorced just civilly. They didn't have an actual get according to the halachic tradition. So what happens to their children if they got divorced and now they remarried somebody else but did not have a halachic get? What are their children considered? Mamzera. They would rather be converts than mamzers. So he ruled that they should do gir lechumra, which means a stringent, meaning we accept you as a Jew, but we want you to convert nevertheless, because if we accept you as a Jew, your children might be mamzers, what some loosely translate as bastards, and you rather be converts than bastards. Yeah. Please. No, it is a digression, but it's fine. It's a digression that's of interest.
According to.
Just a second, sorry. The request is if you could talk loud. Also, the people on Zoom want to hear louder.
According to the elders of the Lemba tribe.
Yeah.
They led Israel.
Yeah.
Before the destruction. Where your Jewish lineage was determined by the mother, that had not yet been enacted.
When was that enacted?
That I'm not sure, but this guy says that was not enacted. Therefore, they trace the lineage through the father, and according to modern Jewish tradition, we don't accept that, and that is why the ruling of the Vestines around the world is that the Lemba have to convert. Maybe the same way as Menashe, but they have to convert because the lineage is not through the mother.
Right. Very interesting. And that, I believe that the lineage changing to mothers started sometime after the destruction of the temple, maybe immediately after, because it was easier to track who's who from your mother. And although prior to that, no worries. I don't know enough. I actually have to look into it. Does it mean that it was only by the father, or did both parents have to be Jewish, or how the conversions worked? Only by the father. I knew the tribes were always by the father, but I didn't know that one's Jewish actual identity.
That's according to this.
Right. Okay. It's something I have to look into and understand a little better. Either way, thank you for that fascinating insight on the history of Lemba Jews. And to understand that this idea of converting is not to disqualify in any way their validity to Judaism. In fact, to make it easier for people who clearly could say they're coming. But I don't know about today, because I can tell you, not Lemba, somebody who I know is going through conversion right now. She is a white Afrikaans or English girl here in South Africa who was able to trace her family coming from Jewish people, but not on her mother's side, or maybe her mother's father, not her mother's mother. And she's been, I know her, she's on the program already 4 years. And she's going through the whole grueling system. Just because one has a Jewish grandparent, doesn't matter which side it's on, doesn't make them Jewish in any way, shape, or form, unless they go through the full conversion process. There's no preferential treatment. So the only ones who get preferential treatment, in Israel at least, were the not Yemenites, we just said it. Falasha, what do they call them? No, the Indian Jews, the Ben Menashe, and the Falasha, I forget what the name for it is, but those who came from Ethiopia. There's a name for it. They call them Falasha Mora or something. Pardon? The Jews are not Jews. Jews are not Jews. Jews are nomadic Arabs living in Israel, but not Jewish. They don't claim to be Jewish. They're not Muslim either. They're Arabs. But you have Arab Christians and Arab Muslims and Arab Jews. Jews who come from Arabic countries are Arabic Jews. Just like you have African Jews coming from Africa. If a Jew falls in love with Jews, listen, One who loves Jews is called a Philosemite. To love Jews, am I pronouncing it correctly? Just like there's an anti-Semite, there's a Philosemite. But that doesn't make one, you don't have to convert to be a Philosemite.
But to marry.
But to marry, yes, one has to convert to marry a Jew. That's works according to Jewish law. While there are many Jews who marry out of the Jewish faith, that is not correct, and Jews should not be doing so. One is in love, then they should certainly be converting into Judaism in order to be qualified as Jewish. Yeah.
Who claim to be descendants of Dan in Western Africa, around like Cameroon, Nigeria, whatever. There's some that practice stuff,
Really?
and they claim to be descendants.
But they've not been accepted, I don't believe. I do believe they're accepted by conservative, like by some conservative group in America, but they've not been accepted by, so interestingly, we had a group of visitors, a couple visiting our shul over Sukkot time, and they were telling us about this group in Africa. Where is this couple from? Forgetting. There's a couple who came to visit us, not from, I know people in Kenya. There's a big group of Noahide Jews in Kenya, but I'm talking about nearby. Anyways, I'm not to digress. I think in Nigeria.
Yeah.
All right. So let's look at something, since we talked about Rambam, let's talk about what Rambam says. Okay? Rambam says that Ruach HaKodesh is a type of a lower level prophecy. Okay, and he describes this phenomenon in the following way. Let me put his writings on the screen. Ready? I have it here in Hebrew, but on the screen it's in English. So I will move between the screen and my text. My text is Hebrew. He says, the person feels, he's describing how Ruach HaKodesh worked. He says the person feels as if something has come upon them and as if they have received a new power that drives them to speak. They speak words of wisdom or compose hymns or exhort their fellows with useful advice or discourse on matters of communal leadership or theology. All this while they are awake and in full possession of their senses. Such a person is said to speak by Ruach HaKodesh. It was through this kind of divine inspiration that King David composed the Psalms and Solomon composed the books of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Songs. And also Daniel, Job, Chronicles, and the rest of the writings were written in this manner. In reference to such Ruach HaKodesh, King David says, the Spirit of God spoke in me. Ruach Elokim Diber Bi. The Spirit of God spoke in me, and his words, Umilaso Alishoni, are on my tongue. That is, says Maimonides, the Spirit of God caused him to speak these words. So while King David composed these Psalms of Tehillim, or shared with us the compositions of other great individuals, including Moses, nevertheless, he says, like the ones I composed, he says, came from divine inspiration. So the common denominator between the Torah, the prophets, and the writings, all these that form Tanakh, is that all three are forms of divine revelation, but three different types of divine revelation, right? All of these books were transcribed during what is known as the era of prophecy, which ended in the first generation of the Second Temple era, okay, the 4th century BCE, about 1,000 years after the revelation at Sinai. By the time the Second Temple came around, the Torah was canonized already. There was nothing added to these. That's why the story of Purim is included in the writings, but the story of Hanukkah is not, because it was already closed. Even though the story of Purim took place after the destruction of the first temple. Pardon? Before the second temple was built. Yep. Darius, King Darius, one of the King Dariuses, I should say, was the son of Queen Esther through Achashverosh. Yeah. Darius the first. But there were other Dariuses subsequently followed him. He was known as the nice Darius. There were other Dariuses who were not so nice. But then they would have been Jewish too, possibly, no? If we're saying that lineage goes, now hold on.
No.
Hold on a second. Even Queen Esther's Darius, was he Jewish if lineage was not passed down from the mother? She had children of Achashverosh.
But at that time, it was not the mother's second part.
So you're saying that Queen Esther's son, Daryavish, was not Jewish?
Well, it depends if you're, which Lord are you?
Yeah. Okay. This is something we have to actually analyze and consider. I've never looked into it well enough to understand at which point and stage in life, in history, was this changed from father to mother, or how that worked, or was it always mother? Is this debated? I don't know if it's discussed in the Talmud. I don't know where it was determined. That's right. But hold on. But King David, Ruth converted to Judaism, and she married. Who did she marry? Boaz. Very good. Who was already Jewish. Yeah, but it doesn't matter. The fact that she converted doesn't give us an indication, because both parents, Ovid, both of his parents were Jewish. Ruth from conversion, and Boaz, born from birth from his mother. All right. So, but the point I'm making is that the end of this era of prophecy was by the time that the second temple was built, Tanakh was canonized, was closed. That was the generation when the men of the Great Assembly, the Anshe Knesset Hagadola, which was then led by Ezra the scribe. Remember, in every generation, you look at today's modern Israeli Knesset, right? The Parliament of Israel. It's called the Knesset. It's a name that's borrowed from the Anshe Knesset Hagadola, the men of the Great Assembly, which was led in every generation by different people. It was 120 sages. How many today in the Knesset? Also 120, right? It was. I think it replicates that. You need a majority of over 61 in order to form a government. So they replicated some aspects of that, right? And that included many of the prophets of that time: Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi. But Ezra and Nehemiah, they were the last ones, and they were the ones who canonized the entire Tanakh, which means that they determined which books, other than the 5 books of the Torah, are included. So there could have been many other great works that were written there. So we'll get to in the future weeks the Midrashim and many there's Toseftas. We'll talk about that. There were many other books. Listen, Sefer Yetzirah even, right, which is attributed to Abraham Avinu. It's not part of the Torah. No. So there's many works that were written, Jewish works, so to say, before that time, just because a great person, the patriarch of the Jewish nation, may have written that book. It's not part of Torah. Only specific works were included in the Torah. Now, I'm talking about Torah now. I'm talking about the word Torah referring to Tanakh. Because part of greater Torah, they are included. So when Dr. Seuss says this mother called all her kids Dave, must have been very, Dave, come for supper. Which one? What are we talking about when we're saying the word Torah? Which meaning of the word Torah? All Torah works compiled post after this time do not have the status of written Torah. They could be part of the oral Torah. So Sefer Yetzirah could be part of the oral Torah. We're talking right now about written Torah. Only these, the Torah, Nevi'im, Ksuvim, are part of the written Torah, the Tanakh. So what we're going to do, please God, next time, is we're going to look at, and that's what we're going to do next week. We'll take select passages from all 3 parts of Tanakh. That's what I want to do with you next week. Now that we've clarified the difference between the 3 parts of Tanakh, and look at just a sampling. So I don't think we'll get into every book of Tanakh if you want to get through Medrash and Talmud and Mishnah and Talmud and all the other works. The video gave you an idea of what each of the books of Tanakh are about. If you want, we could do a quick review of that next week, what every book of Tanakh is, without going into great detail. But we'll take a sampling of each of these areas, and we'll look at historical narratives, which you can find in Torah, and Nevi'im, and Kesuvim. We'll look at legal passages, which you can find in all three. We'll look at inspirational poetry, which you can find in all of them, and philosophical insights, etc. And we'll try to get to each of these areas to get a good taste of each of them. So just to recap what we discussed today, we said that the 24 books of the written Torah includes all these aspects: law and ethics and history and morals and values and poetry and philosophy and psychology and whatever you want. It's all in there. Right? Every genre of literature is included in the Torah. And the common denominator is that, what does Torah mean? Instruction. They all provide us with instruction on how to live our lives meaningfully and purposefully as God wanted us to. They are instruction manual for life. So the 24 books, and you could say it's much more than that, because as you see in the list, there's 12 additional books, but they're all in one volume. All these books are grouped into these categories that we said: Torah, Nevi'im, Kesuvim, the Torah, the prophets, and the scriptures. That represents why they're in these three categories, even though some of them overlap with each other. Like I said, the book of Ruth, which is composed by Shmuel, Hanavi, the prophet, whereas Shmuel goes into the prophets and Ruth goes into the writings, because there were different degrees of divine revelation in each of them in writings. Okay, I could put that, let me put that back up here to remind you. Let's put that right up here. Okay, again, whoever wants to see, here we have the writings, which includes Tehillim, Psalms, Mishlei, Proverbs, Eov, Job, Shir Hashirim, King Solomon's Song of Songs, Ruth, which we are told is composed by Shmuel Hanavi, Eicha Lamentations, which is composed by a different prophet who's in this category, Jeremiah, Yirmiyahu. You have Kohelet, which is again King Solomon, Esther, Daniel, Ezra, Nehemiah, Divrei Hayim in the Chronicles, and here you have the prophets in this set. So the point is, it's different degrees of divine revelation of the way the prophecy manifested with the prophets. All 613 mitzvahs of the Torah said are only in these 5 books, not in the others, even though the others might repeat or elucidate or elaborate or highlight or emphasize the mitzvahs, but they are only in these 5 books. Okay. Well, I think these are most Mishnah Gemara quotes from all of them. Quote from all, but the mitzvahs are specifically in only these 5. So yes, the other sections have lots of theological and moral, inspirational, ethical, psychological, whatever you want to call it. All those ideas are included in there, but only in here could you find the 613 mitzvahs. Okay, so please God, Monday we will do what I actually sent out today's message: the divine and the human in Torah, because we're going to look at interpretation, and we'll get more into it, please God, next week. I'm looking forward to a very exciting. I prepared a slide. Actually, I'll pick it up here, although maybe I should perfect it. Let me quickly give you the slide that I prepared, because I know for our science enthusiasts, I'm not going to teach science because I don't know science, but I did put in some DNA and some stuff just to give it a little bit more interest. All right. We'll continue next week, please God. Looking forward. Thank you all. Zeitgesund tomorrow morning. Join Rebbitzin, Miriam, Banishevitz right here for some deep inspiration in the letters of the Torah. I'm sure you'll all find it of great interest. Thank you all for joining. How do I shut this out? Hold on a second. Escape and pause.